Good morning and welcome to the Franco-American Heritage Center for a historic event for Lewiston, Auburn, and the state of Maine. We are assembled here today to officially dedicate the locally called South Bridge, which we found out was officially called State Bridge 3330, to the Bernard Lown Peace Bridge. What a wonderful change. We shall begin today's program with the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner by the combined chamber choirs of Lewiston and Edward Little High School under the direction of Rebecca Popke and Beth Labrie. But first, I'd like to introduce to you our piano player this morning. I first saw him when he played Robin Hood in the middle school play. Please have a welcome. He's a sophomore at Edward Little High School, Mr. Nathan Fairchild. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for our national anthem. Dr. Bernard and Louise Lown. Married 62 years, your life's journey together has truly been as one. On behalf of all of us assembled here today, on behalf of all the citizens of Auburn and Lewiston and the state of Maine, welcome home. We are sorry Governor Baldacci couldn't be with us today. We had an opportunity to meet with the governor at the bill signing, but we are very pleased to have with us, representing the governor, a personal friend of the Lown family. From Orono, please welcome State Representative Emily Kane.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here today. I think it's important that I, on behalf of the state, thank all of the organizers of this event, and I need to especially thank Senator Peggy Rotundo, who many of you know, you all probably know, who asked me to be here today to present a proclamation from the governor. Peggy had a family wedding this weekend, and she, I know, is thinking of us right now, because I saw her yesterday and she kept saying, I really wish I could be there. So on her behalf, I'd like to say thank you to all of the organizers, to the mayors, Mayor Gilbert, Mayor Jenkins, to Al Harvey, to the city councilors, and I think it's important to recognize the legislative delegation from Lewiston and Auburn. Senator Peggy Rotundo, Senator Lois Snow-Mello, Representatives Dick Wagner, Elaine Marcus, Margaret Craven, Mike Carey, Mark Sampson, Deborah Simpson, and Mike Bolia. Without them, we really wouldn't be here. It was a group effort. And I want to take time to recognize all of them and thank them for their work. I'm sure you're wondering, why is the representative from Orono here in Lewiston, Auburn to present this proclamation? Just to share with you quickly, I'm a graduate of the University of Maine, as many of you probably are, and I had the privilege when I was a student of meeting Dr. Bernard Lown, who, like me, is a graduate of the honors program at the University of Maine, now the Honors College. The first time I met Dr. Lown, I had the privilege of having dinner with him, and we talked about big issues. We talked about global issues, about peace and understanding, and about medicine, which I'm sure he'll talk to you about today. And at the end of the dinner, I thanked him so much. He said some very kind words to me, and I followed up with a letter saying that how much he had inspired me, and I really hope to take what I had learned from him and bring it to my graduate studies and higher education. I hope to be a president of a college or university someday. And he wrote me back a very nice letter where he said, "It's great you want to be a college president, but you really should get into politics." I think his exact words were, "Maybe you're too smart to enter the quagmire of politics." And I don't know whether I'm too smart or not, but a few years later, I was asked to run for the legislature, and one of my first contacts after saying yes was Dr. Lown to say, "Look what you did." So here we are, and so I have kept that friendship and kept in touch with him, and it's really an honor for me to be here. I do need to recognize from the university who are here today, Dean Charlie Slavin from the Honors College, and Danny Williams, who is also my husband, from the University of Maine Foundation. They're sitting right over here. Thank them for coming today as well. And now the proclamation. It's quite beautiful. State of Maine Proclamation. Whereas Dr. Bernard Lown was born in Lithuania in 1921 and arrived with his family in Lewiston, Maine at the age of 13. And whereas Dr. Lown graduated summa cum laude from the University of Maine in 1942. And whereas among Dr. Lown's accomplishments after graduating from the University of Maine, he developed the direct current defibrillator, which has helped save an overwhelming number of lives. And whereas Dr. Lown was a founder of Physicians for Social Responsibility and the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. And whereas Dr. Lown accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War in 1985. And whereas Dr. Bernard Lown has devoted more than 50 years to the practice of medicine, the field of cardiology, and the betterment of humankind. And whereas, through unanimous approval from the Auburn and Lewiston City Councils, and as a result of legislative action, the South Bridge between the two communities is being renamed as the Bernard Lown Peace Bridge. And whereas the state of Maine officially recognizes Dr. Lown for his tremendous accomplishments throughout his career and life, now therefore I, John E. Baldacci, Governor of the state of Maine, do hereby proclaim October 17th, 2008 as Dr. Bernard Lown Day. Throughout the state of Maine, and urge all citizens to recognize this observance. In testimony whereof I have caused the great seal of the state of Maine to be hereunto affixed, given under my hand at Augusta this 15th day of October 2008, John Elias Baldacci, Governor. It's also signed by the Secretary of State, Matthew Dunlap. So happy Bernard Lown Day, Dr. Lown, and thank you for all that you do.
Certainly a great day for the state of Maine and Lewiston, Auburn. I am grateful to Dr. and Mrs. Lown for inviting me to attend a gala a few weeks ago in Boston. It was a fundraiser for the Lown Cardiovascular Research Center. It was a most memorable evening, and I thank you so much. At that soiree, they showed a video that was produced specifically for that event. It has, by the way, been made available to all the schools in Lewiston, Auburn through the superintendent's office. So sit back and relax in these most comfortable seats, and let's get to know Bernard and Louise Lown.
I think this is the point of Bernard Lown's story. Somebody must take the initiative.
This was a man who saw around the corners and could see into the future.
He said, I know this is hard, but think of what we win when we win.
He's done so many things in his life, any one of which sort of would make someone's career. Learning why digitalis would give some people fatal heart arrhythmias, the defibrillator, and he just moved on to the next thing.
You know, many of us recognize when we've spent time with him that he's bar none the finest clinician we've ever encountered.
Dr. Lown rounded 3 days a week, and I looked forward to those days. That is where I learned my approach to patients.
When you go into the room with that patient was the only person in the world for Dr. Lown.
And the first thing he would do is sit down, pull up a chair, and sit face to face with the patient. And they're in the bed feeling very vulnerable, and you could just see how everything just would unfold.
Within a very brief period of time, I was totally at ease with Bernie.
He provided an example of the kind of care that we all wanted our parents to have.
My father suddenly stopped being an illness in a human body. My father was a human being. Dr. Lown was taking care of him, and he knew what that meant.
It was an extraordinary privilege to be his associate. When I rotated through the coronary care unit, Dr. Lown was the attending. I enjoyed the challenge, always learned something. I wished he'd let me ask 2 questions a day instead of 1, but I always learned something anyway.
Marshall was so smart, and he had so many questions that Bernard finally had to limit him to 1 question a day.
He used to drive me crazy because every time I meet him, he says, I have 10 questions. And that would have taken most of my day.
I guess some complex questions, so I get 2 answers out of 1 question.
At any time during rounds, we would change from something to do with the patient's heart to his turning towards one of the interns or residents and saying, what's the last book you read?
My initial thought was, what textbook? Which cardiology textbook? He said, no, what novel? He said, you can't be a physician unless you're reading a novel.
Bernard used that as a point that you can't take care of patients unless you're part of the fabric of your patient's life.
Every day I was scrambling for childcare, and every day I was getting later and later for rounds. Finally on Friday I was so late that I came dashing through the swinging doors of the Levine cardiac unit just as Dr. Lown was leaving, having finished rounds, with his whole entourage. And he stopped and he glared at me and he said, Dr. Roberts, if you were a man, you'd have been fired by now. And I just lost my Irish temper and I said, Dr. Lown, if I were a man, I'd have a wife looking after my children. And there was this collective gasp. And after what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, Dr. Lown said, that's a very good retort. And I almost fainted with relief. And we have been friends ever since.
Dr. Lown came up with the idea of using DC voltage, which I had an understanding of course, being in the TV business, and he said they would like to use me basically as a guinea pig. He said they just did not know enough about it, and he said, yeah, we're just dumb. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, and I've never heard a doctor tell me before that he was dumb. Apparently, as I said, they maybe didn't give me enough anesthesia, so that when they gave me the paddles, and boom, it felt like a horse kicked me in the chest or something. It wasn't painful, it was just like a wallop, like getting hit or banged or punched. It was just momentary. Hey, what can I say? It kept me alive.
The impact of Dr. Lown, I think is so powerful because the messages are so simple and true, and they resonate with people. The individual human being is of infinite value, and if you can help him, you do anything you can. And if you need to advance and stretch the field of science, you need to do that. And then is that enough? No, it's not enough. You need to take responsibility for the larger world.
And I think this is the point of Bernard Lown's story. Somebody must take the initiative. And if you take the initiative, then there's a good chance that other people will follow. And that's how movements grow, and that's how change takes place.
A fundamental aspect of IPPNW is a recognition that politicians need to be compelled by people whose life is in jeopardy.
Dr. Lown always talked about how nuclear weapons and humanity cannot coexist. It's one or the other.
This was the greatest political issue of our time because it didn't mean the death of an individual, but the death of multitudes. So why would doctors not get involved? Here's where it began.
We kept meeting in Bernie Lown's living room, and it was an exhilarating time because we were kind of making it up on the fly. There was no script. By 1985, we were awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace. As is often the case with the Nobel Prize, they're not really rewarding you for what you've already done. They're sending a message. This is something that the Nobel Committee thinks is very important.
And we have to find new ways to reach out. And the Nobel is laying down a gauntlet for us, that we physicians have to do more.
Dr. Lown, I think, had a mix of emotions at that time. It was, first of all, emotionally charged because his friend, Dr. Chazov, was being criticized in the press. And it was emotionally charged because we almost had a person die right in front of us.
Repeat my question. Do you regret or deplore that you signed the appeal against Sakharov in 1973?
Пресс-конференция движения.
This is not a personal conference of mine, but a press conference of the movement.
In the midst of all of this, in the front row, suddenly this guy keels over and looks like sudden cardiac death. We were doing the resuscitation and he began to come around a little bit, but he really looked like he was dying. It was important to not let it end on that note. We had to complete what we were there for.
You know, when the crisis comes, Soviet and American cardiologists cooperate. And this crisis we face now in a big way for all humankind. And this is a very strange parable that shows we forget our ideology, we forget our differences. We do not care whether it's a Russian or American.
It shows you how deeply caring, I think, Lown really was, that this affected him on all of those levels. Lo and behold, the guy made it. He lived. As a matter of fact, he recovered, and then some of our doctors went to visit him in the hospital after he recovered from this heart attack. And for years after that, Lev Novikov would give talks about how great IPPNW was. I don't know if he agreed with our politics, but he certainly agreed with our resuscitation attempts.
He's a man of the world who has dedicated his life to service his patients and to the happiness of entire mankind.
One of the impressive things about Dr. Lown is that he's committed not just to patients in front of him, but to people all around the world, wherever they may be.
Satellites started back before there was the World Wide Web. Satellites started before a lot of us here in the United States knew anything about internet or interconnectivity. We were the first email providers in Africa. This is where Dr. Lown was really out on the cutting edge. Put up a satellite, set up some ground stations in Africa, and expect people to start communicating with each other. And his whole premise was we can use satellites for peace. We don't have to have Star Wars. We can make the world a better place using the same technology. And in fact, he proved that it was true.
This is a model that offers hope for the larger part of the world where the resources are scarce, but the problems are just as significant.
As much as Dr. Lown is a pioneer, his vision for satellite is that it should be pioneering. You know, I'm comfortable in saying we're true to his vision and we're doing the work that he really started this organization to do.
I don't think it's possible to see into the future. It's only possible to hope for the future, and it's possible to act for the future in the hopes that then you will see something.
Really, action has always been a hallmark of everything Bernard does.
It seemed like particularly small people, individuals, academics could really do nothing. And yet he said something can be done.
You think you've reached your limit in terms of what's possible to do, and he somehow helps reach into other people and just brings out even more energy.
He's just like a force of nature.
Nobody in a position like Bernie's can succeed without a very close person. You need somebody who's really your best friend.
Louise Lown is a force in and of herself.
Without Louise Lown, we wouldn't have a Bernard Lown.
Well, she's really his secret weapon, and I give her a lot of the credit.
I think that Dr. and Mrs. Lown are one of the great untold love stories. And she is a human rights activist in her own right. They just seem to complement each other perfectly.
It's a package. They come together.
You know, in the Catholic faith, we have saints, you know, and I'd say Louise Lown is a saint.
She's a saint because she puts up with Bernie.
In 1978, outside this front door, Louise and I were standing on the grounds. It was a late spring afternoon, and I was standing there, and suddenly, out of a clear blue, I say, I have an answer. Soviet doctors and American doctors have to create a compact. She says, I mean, I didn't think she says, are you smoking pot? But something to that effect. The night before, Gorbachev asked me to address the forum. It was totally unprepared, I thought. So at 12 midnight, Louise and I sat down, and I was dictating to her, and I was tired and irritable, and she was patient as a saint. The more irritable I got, the more tranquil she became.
It is he who got the Nobel Prize, and it is he who was on TV, and it is he who writes the papers. But it is so apparent that it would have been very hard to be Bernard if somebody wasn't there being Louise with him.
If you can get sort of a critical mass of interested, energetic, hardworking physicians who really believe in the absolute necessity of doing something about the cause, then you can have success.
Even if Dr. Lown is not leading the charge, that those of us who've been influenced by his example will do our part to carry on the mission.
And I think it's a critical time that his vision and his approach be preserved.
We have an endless role as long as we understand our mission.
The best way to pay tribute to Dr. Lown is to join him.
That's how you pay tribute to them, by sending a message that we heard you loud and clear, and we're going to keep that mission alive indefinitely.
Some of those people in the video are here today, so I hope at our reception you'll seek them out and have an opportunity to meet them. Before we meet our honoree as our keynote speaker, I'd like to tell you about Dr. Lown's newest book. It's called Prescription for Survival, A Doctor's Journey to End Nuclear Madness. Because you care enough to be here today, I implore you to care enough to read Dr. Lown's words. It is brilliantly written and most compelling and inspiring story. I know our schools and libraries have them on order. Or you can go to Amazon.com and get this for less than $20 now. That's a deal. Read it, then give it to somebody. Many people have stated that in addition to the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Lown should have received the Nobel Prize in Medicine as well. Well, Dr. Lown, there's still the Nobel Prize in Literature, then the Pulitzer, and of course a movie deal. If you haven't read his first book, The Lost Art of Healing, that is also a must-read. Dr. Lown has been quoted as saying that more lives can be saved by reading his books than all of his cardiovascular innovations combined. To introduce our honoree, please welcome to the podium Professor Emeritus of Psychology at Bates College, Instructor of Peace and World Studies, and Editor of Peace and Conflict, Journal of Peace Psychology. Please welcome Professor Richard Wagner.
Thanks, Al. Normally when I introduce a speaker at Bates College, the students have never heard of the person, so I can go through great detail about the career, the life, the publications, and then allow the person to go up and speak to the students. In this case, however, you all already know everything that's important about Bernard Lown. You've seen it on the video, you've read it in the newspaper, Al's just told us a few things. What can I say? I could repeat things like he emigrated from Lithuania 70 plus years ago, that he graduated to summa cum everything from the University of Maine and then from Johns Hopkins Medical School, that in 1961 he developed the DC defibrillator, that he joined with Soviet Dr. Evgeny Shazov to form International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, that somewhere in there he, Shazov, and IPPNW won a small Nobel Peace Prize, that he has authored 2 brilliant books, which were just mentioned by Al Harvey, and 2 copies of which will be back in the Lewiston Public Library on Monday morning, I promise. But I won't, because you already know those things from the newspaper, the video, the proclamation. So I guess all I'm left with is to say what a great honor, privilege, and supreme pleasure it is to introduce to you the extraordinary graduate of Lewiston High School, class of 1938, Dr. Bernard Lown.
Al Harvey, Richard Wagner, Mayor Gilbert, Mayor Jenkins, friends of a bygone era, current friends, family. I'm glad to recognize and proud that my son Fred is here. His daughter, my granddaughter, Melanie, and a consort or whatever. What? Yeah, fiance. Colin Moore here, and my brother Milton, his wife Naomi, and even from Israel, cousins Daron, Daphna, and Shahar Grosbart are here for the occasion. I'm glad that the members of the Lown Group and the president of the Lown Foundation left early this morning, though he's rounding to be here, Dr. Vikas Saini. Of course, it's at this stage of life to be greeted by such words, I'm convinced
a eulogy will be a non-event. I left Lewiston precisely 70 years ago. Since departing to the University of Maine in 1978, regrettably, I visited Lewiston only 3 times. Once to give a commencement address at Bates College. Secondly, to speak on the nuclear issue. And third is this happy occasion today. Yet Lewiston has left far more and deeper enduring impact than have Baltimore, New York, and Boston, where I've lived far longer. It is here in Lewiston that I first gained initial exposure to the remarkable experience of being an American and to the English language. Learning English was not a completely happy undertaking. High school sophomore English was especially traumatic. The teacher regarded me as a bumbling idiot. I could not distinguish the proper pronunciation of certain words. When I was called in English class to read some passages out loud, there was a commotion. The class went into hilarious uproar when I read, "I was lying on the bitch." I was kept back, and I received an F for the year. As a result, I was not accepted to any college except on trial at the University of Maine. I was informed by the dean of the university, Lown, if you're a very average guy. If you try very hard, you're a potentially C student. And I proved the inadequacy of pedagogy in assessing individual potential. I graduated relatively well. However, because of the tough love as a sophomore in Lewiston High School, I concentrated on mastering the English language. And the way I did it is reading Webster's dictionary and doing enormous amount of prodigious reading of literature. It helped me hone a sensibility of the power and beauty of English. Without this traumatic experience, I'm sure I would not have been an effective communicator or a successful organizer. So thank you, Lewiston High School. It is here in Lewiston, as you've already heard, that I fell in love and cultivated Louise. She was my first English teacher. You also heard that in a few months we'll be celebrating 62 years of our marriage. This long compact is testimony of Louise's forbearance, and you heard about her sainthood. As she has been the best choice I've ever made in my life, and I hope this is also her opinion. I have not encountered a more exceptional human being, kind and forgiving, always on the lookout to helping others, a wise mother, a solicitous grandmother, a healer, an interesting companion, a comrade in common struggle, and above all, a spiritual mate. So once again, thank you, Lewiston. My intent to pursue a medical career also came in Lewiston. Initially, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent until I was invited one Saturday afternoon at the home of Dr. Max Hirschler, and I'm very pleased that their son Eric is here today. Dr. Hirschler was a German refugee and had a very rough time. And though he was an extraordinarily gifted surgeon, he ended up as an internist in this city. One day they invited me for afternoon tea. I sat spellbound, ignorant and envious of their enormous cultural reach. I've never heard of Francois Villon and his poetry and that great 15th century French troubadour. I never heard the magnificent music of Antonio Vivaldi. I concluded that doctors were the cultural avant-garde of civilization. From that moment on, I was determined to be a physician. I never regretted that judgment, though it was totally based on a false premise. Dr. Hirschler urged me to attend Johns Hopkins Medical School, a school he regarded as the first in the United States. I obtained there a medical degree, and again, thanks to Lewiston for helping with the right career choice. Lewiston was also a place where I cut my political teeth and gained a critical view of the political order and acquired a deep insight in our class-dominated society. This too happened in a very unexpected manner, and those of you who saw the marvelous video on Maine Public Broadcasting that Frank Farrell did a few days ago know about this episode. I was constantly complaining to my father at the extreme poverty of having to survive on a 75 cents a week allowance. One day he indicated that I could grow very rich by working part-time in the shoe factory that was then on strike. And he promised me $15 a week, a wage which seemed like suddenly being transformed into Mr. Rockefeller. There was a strike, big strike going on. The year was 1937. The winter was cold and dreary. I went to work not realizing, and I had no moral issue at the time of being a strike breaker. One day when I was walking in the picket line, one of the pickets yelled out, "Scabs," to those of us who are walking in the factory. And walking along with me were strike breakers who looked more like thugs than shoe workers. I remember distinctly the picket who did the shouting. He was short, scrawny, middle-aged man. No sooner did he shout when he was knocked unconscious by one of the strike breakers. He was on the ground with a broken nose, some knocked out teeth, bleeding on the snow, and rapidly a policeman came and arrested him. I was shocked, I was outraged, and I began to look into what was going on in Lewiston at the time. I became obsessed with those events convulsing our twin cities. Pickets were being roughed up and arrested by police and the National Guard armed with submachine guns. The justice system was transformed into kangaroo courts, flagrantly biased against the workers, issuing injunctions, abrogating fundamental civil rights, prohibiting mass meetings, invoking medieval conspiracy laws that hadn't been applied for 100 years. French-Canadian workers, barely literate, were accused of being part of an international communist conspiracy. The press was primarily publishing manufacturers' handouts, not mentioning the long, grueling hours, the abysmal working conditions. I didn't realize that in Lewiston and Auburn, the major struggle of workers since 1848 was reducing the 15-hour day to an 11-hour day, and to prevent children of 11 and younger from working in these factories around here. That was a struggle of 100 years going on in this community, and it's lost to history. Now, the strikers and their families were being starved and frozen into submission. When the assault against workers finally reached the U.S. Supreme Court, one of the justices compared what happened in Lewiston and Auburn to the practices of Nazi Germany. No doubt the fact that I was a refugee from Hitlerism, having arrived in Lewiston just a few years earlier, accounts for the deep impact of those events. I've remained a permanent radical, and I'm not apologetic. I don't even call myself a liberal. I'm a radical. Because a radical really goes to the roots of problems. You're not apologetic for wanting to improve society, for wanting to make life livable, for wanting to have peace prevail. And I was left with a permanent outrage, which gives me, at this stage of life, Frank Farrell, I have a bone to pick with you. You made me 89, though I'm only 87, you know? But even at that age, I feel this outrage gives me the energy to speak out, to organize, to mobilize, and to oppose injustice. So thank you, Lewiston and Auburn, for sharpening my moral sensibilities while I was still an impressionable youngster. I've expressed appreciation to Lewiston and Auburn for enriching my life in 4 vital areas, namely mastery of the English language, gaining a lifelong companion, choosing medicine as my profession, and providing me with a moral compass. But there's a 5th reason, and that's what brings us here today, and that's the bridge naming. Much in life that is meaningful is propelled by many conspiracies of some well-meaning folk. As the great American anthropologist Margaret Mead wrote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does." It invariably begins with an inspired idea obsessing someone. Nothing very much happens until he or she involves another, and then another, and then still another. This very same thing is true of the bridge. It was a true maverick, Alan Harvey, who conceived the bridge naming after listening to a commencement address I delivered at Bates. And this was 25 years ago. As he wrote in an email 2 days ago, I quote, "I can finally see the shoreline after a very long journey. It has been a most wondrous voyage," end quote. But an idea is never enough. We must persevere and persuade others. Harvey persevered for 25 years. His idea had not taken hold until he connected with another enthusiastic conspirator, Mayor Larry Gilbert here. And for Louise and myself, this brought an early dividend as we became friends of Larry and Pat Gilbert. Harvey found close support from Auburn Mayor John Jenkins. State Representative Richard Wagner gave mobility to the project in the state legislature. And of course, you know well, having heard that some of the robust energy was provided by Emily Kane from Orono and the University of Maine. Now, I'm grateful to Governor Baldacci for this proclamation. I think it's effusive and excessive, but I accept it with pleasure. I must confess that having a bridge named for someone appears far more significant than the naming of a street, of an avenue, or of a building. A bridge metaphorically projects the image of connecting, crossing a divide, bridging differences. This is a bridge to somewhere, not a Washington earmark. The bridge is especially meaningful to me as a physician. To be an effective doctor, one must be able to connect with another human being. In fact, to connect is to build a bridge. It is representative, it is rather a prerequisite to fostering trust, indispensable for gaining understanding, obligatory in comprehending illness, and mandatory for healing the afflicted. It is a key to exposing and grasping the deeper ache in every human heart. One is always building bridges in order to gain friends. But this bridge is far more than merely honoring of a single individual. This bridge promotes the quest for peace. This singular dedication is juxtaposed to the more frequent celebration of war and militarism. Long ago, John Lennon of Beatle fame wrote a song, "Give Peace a Chance." This goal has been far too long delayed. In song, in poetry, in prayer, in shouts and whispers, in endless demonstrations, people have denounced the ugliness of war. No more angry or powerful lyric has been written than Bob Dylan's Masters of War. Forgive my indulgence in citing some excerpts from Dylan. Come, you masters of war, you that build all the guns, you that build the death planes, you that build the big bombs, you that never done nothing but build to destroy, you play with my world like it's your little toy. You lie and deceive, a world war can be won. You fasten the triggers for the others to fire. Then you get back and watch when the death count gets higher. You might say that I'm young. You might say I'm unlearned. But there's one thing I know. Though I'm younger than you, even Jesus would never forgive what you do. Peace has been intoned prayerfully from the earliest recorded human history. But instead we have had thousands of years of killing. Thou shalt not kill remains the most powerful commandment that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. Prescription against murder has been codified into the laws of every nation. Murder, when committed by individual, is severely punished. And here's the odd paradox. When a murder rampages in a community, killing one or more people, it is widely headlined in news media, and the outrage is felt everywhere, and it is condemned utterly. Yet no one blinks at the fact when nations engage in mass killing. Nor do we regard the death of thousands as mass terrorism. We just killed off more than 100,000 Iraqi people. We don't think our morals are compromised. We don't think our religious faith is compromised. We don't think our human values are compromised. On the contrary, we do not question it. We equate it to nobility of purpose, of heroism, of patriotism, and bestow honors. We are made to think of it as promoting democracy, bringing civilization to barbarian cultures. We fill cities with monuments commemorating battles and generals. War and militarism exact enormous costs, not only in human life, nearly exclusively the life of the very young, but in the resources needed for a civil society to function. Lewiston and Auburn, as well as the state of Maine, have budget deficits and are forced to cut back on social services. Similar fiscal crisis prevails in every community in the United States. Everywhere you hear the same mantra that we have to curtail spending. This means cut back the help for needy, for the poor, for the old, for the disabled, for the young people, for their education, for healthcare, for police, for firefighters, for veterans, for energy independence, for inner city, for infrastructure, you name it, America is lacking. We are told we are living beyond our means. We are lectured by business school types that we have to be fiscally responsible. We must cut back government waste. No governor, no federal or state official, no mayor, no media pundits dare to tell people the truth. We have plenty of money. And here's the big secret. We spend much of it on the military. This year we shall be spending $1 trillion on the military. You wouldn't know it. It is squirreled away in various pockets, so the ordinary citizen can't figure out how much is being spent. It is hidden in the Pentagon budget, in separate allocations for the war in Iraq and Iran. Iraq and Afghanistan, God forbid, Iran. In the Veterans Department, in the budget of Homeland Security, in the Energy Department, in 16 Secret Service agencies, and God knows where else. Firing a single Tomahawk missile in Afghanistan cost $500,000. That could build 20 schools in Afghanistan. I ask you, which is more likely to subdue the Taliban, the Tomahawk missile or the 20 schools? A B-1 bomber, once intended to fight the Cold War, cost more than $1 billion. We haven't stopped building similar planes. The amount spent on a single bomber would fund Pell Grants for 700,000 American youngsters to attend college. Pray tell me, which would make America safer? Building costly weapons to fight the Cold War that ended in 1991, or being more competitive in the global market? Certainly educating our youngsters would not only give them hope for a better and more meaningful life, but would give our nation strength. This is the time when our schools are run down. This at a time when 65% of 12th graders in America can't read or write English at their grade level. This at a time when United States high schools, as reported 2 weeks ago, ranked at the very bottom in math and science among industrialized countries. I am therefore proud that my hometown is celebrating peace. A commitment to waging peace needs to spread all over our great country. If we Americans lead in promoting peace, I'm certain the world will follow. Confronting us is whether to choose triumph of the human spirit or colossal tragedy for all of humankind. Which shall it be? This is largely up to each and every one of us. By naming a bridge honoring peace, you have taken a single step forward to lift the curtain to a new age and away from the sickening tragedy that has befallen all of us for far too long. I thank you for honoring me in such a meaningful way. Thank you.
Still on 3, folks. Thank you all for coming to this dedication of this bridge. And as bridges link communities together, so does the work of Dr. Lown and his family's work of their lives have linked so many lives together as well. As we saw in the video, many people's lives have been touched and linked by the great work of Dr. Lown and his foundation and the work of his family. So we thank you, and let us continue building bridges that link us to other people. But I gotta say that this beautiful space that we have here, dedicated to the city by the Larrabee family, but of course our outstanding public works folks who really made this a beautiful spot that we will truly honor and cherish from this day forward. Thank you for your great work. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your great work as well. Dr. Lown?
Yes, they'll lift it up over. You'll do.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Larry, you're going to have to help.
I'll help as well.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. There you go.
You're behind the scenes.
Bridge of peace. Bridge of peace. Bridge of peace. Bridge of peace. Bridge of peace.
Well, we're back on the All-America City side of Lewiston. But the city of Auburn has also been designated as the All-America City. So I want to welcome all of you to the All-America Cities of Lewiston and Auburn. And this bridge links us together and is now a peace bridge. And let us hope that this message of today carries us to work together for the common good, and I'll use the words of Dr. Lown, for the common good of humankind. He uses that word a lot. And this journey to today has been a wonderful journey. When Al and I, we work the track meets at Bates College. He announces and I officiate. And he was telling me about this Dr. Lown, a 1938 graduate of Lewiston High School who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And he said, I want to get the South Bridge named in honor of him and call it a peace bridge. And so I said, give me the material. I contacted Mayor Jenkins, and from there we moved forward. But first we had to find Dr. Lown. So contacted the University of Maine, Orono, because we knew he had graduated there. And the Alumni Association, I forget just the proper name for it, but Emily could probably tell us.
That's right, Alumni Association.
Okay, good. And they gave me his phone number. I had his phone number. And I called and Mrs. Lown answered, because I didn't know where they were in this world. And she answered and she put Dr. Lown on the phone, and he said that he would be honored to have a bridge named in his honor. And pleased, and from there we formed a committee and went to work on it. But during the course of this past year, I've had an opportunity to visit Mr. and Mrs. Lown at their home and then with my wife this summer at their summer place on Sebago Lake. And we developed a friendship. And I am only sorry that I have not known this couple, this beautiful couple, my entire life. And so when I asked him to speak today, it was at Sebago Lake, and he said, well, how long, about 15 minutes? I said, I could listen to you all day. And he said, I love vanity. He says, you bought yourself another 5 minutes. So I'm glad I got even more than 5 minutes. That was super. But he is a man, a cardiologist by trade, a heart doctor, but a heart doctor with a heart.